And welcome everyone to the actual For Realsies Tomorrow show. My name is Jamie Higginbotham. Oh, what an adventure getting this particular show live, but I am joined by our epic and amazing panel of people. I've got a Space Mike right over here, a Jared Head right down here, and a Ryan Caton right over there, and we're going to have an amazing show for you today. We've already had our fun dose of technical issues, so hopefully those are out of our way, and I want to get started straight. I don't have any
like
wood.
Our main topic.
I don't have any wood to knock on, so we'll see what actually happens. But
like a Russian space station, we're always trying to fix this thing.
The beautiful thing was you like had a handoff in between, and so like you stalled halfway through. It was amazing. That's gonna be today's show. Hopefully you guys have liked. I do want to get into our main topic, but really for the live part of the show, you guys get a little bit of extra stuff and a little bit of extra banter, right? But you noticed last week we did post an on-demand like recap of kind of some of the individual segments. I'd love to know what you thought of those, what you want to see done differently there. I know that there was and then also Space Mike did his own independent segment, that was not related to the live show at all. And the way all of this works is for the members of tomorrow, we have the member show. That's what we're calling it now, the member show. It's like an exclusive club that we have afterwards, and any member can join. And we've been like last week, we went over. It was like a 3-hour member show. Like it was a long time, and we go over all of the things that are coming up in the next week, all of the changes you guys want to see. It was pretty fun. It was pretty cool. I expect we'll do something similar this week. As Allison says, the show is already off the rails. It never starts on the rails. Allison, it never starts on the rails. All right, let's go ahead and get started with our main topic, which is the new slew of medium lift launchers that are coming on the market. We've got Rocket Lab, Neutron, one of them. The other Neuron.
That's the optional fourth stage.
And then the Stoke Space Nova as two. There are more than that, but those are two, in development medium lift launchers. I personally am not very versed on these vehicles or what their latest update is. So I figured I'd turn to Ryan and be like, Ryan, could you educate me as to where we're at with not the Neuron, but the Neutron and the Nova?
Yeah, so I think we could probably say these two are the most unique, maybe, or these two are these are the big ones that everyone's kind of keeping an eye on, right? So Neutron from Rocket Lab have decided to go down a route of having an integrated fairing onto the first stage and then a second stage that's kind of underslung within that first stage booster. So when the first stage comes back to do a landing back on Earth, because it's meant to be partially reusable, those fairings, instead of throwing them into the ocean and needing a support ship to go and fish them out, they'll come right back with the booster. So they'll be ready to go as soon as the booster gets back, right? And then with Nova, which is Stoke Space's reusable vehicle, it's going to be fully reusable, like Starship aspires to be. And like Starship, they're introducing hot staging. But Stoke are doing a somewhat unique design, right? So they've got their first stage booster, which is going to be, it looks pretty much like a scaled down Falcon 9 first stage, but it's only got 3 legs compared to the 4 legs on Falcon 9. And then the upper stage is going to be using this really unique heat shield engine combination, right? So it's got loads of individual thrusters around the outside of that first stage, and then it kind of uses the geometry of the heat shield in order to make a giant aero spike. I know Jared likes his aero spike, so there you go. So that entire base there of their Hopper vehicle, which they tested a couple years ago, you can see there, it kind of forms this aero spike underneath the heat shield there. And then that heat shield will be passively cooled, so it can be used as a heat shield when that second stage re-enters the atmosphere. And that means both stages of this vehicle will be maybe rapidly reusable, at least. Rapidly comes later.
Right. Very good summary of that.
And the interesting thing this week is both of these rockets got a update from their respective companies. I'll start off with Neutron, as Rocket Lab released their Payload Users Guide, which sounds, really, it's basically a massive PDF. It doesn't sound that interesting, but it's got cool information inside of it. So instead of, reading through tens of pages on PDF live on the show,
but it's such compelling television if you were to read
I
tens
know, right?
of pages of
It's what everyone wants to see.
It could be even more compelling if we, as you're reading it, we just put up a PDF not highlighting any of it.
Yep. Anyway, I'll give you the highlights from the PDF that Rocket Lab released. So the key items that they released were the numbers to geostationary transfer orbit, which we hadn't seen before. So how much mass Neutron will be able to take to GTO, which is, if you've been seeing a lot of the launches this year, a good chunk of them have been to this geostationary transfer orbit. So it's definitely one of those key orbits that a lot of people want to reach. So interestingly, next to RTLS, there is an N/A, not applicable. So according to this PDF, Neutron will not be able to return to the launch site if they are launching a payload to GTO. And then for the downrange recovery on a drone ship, because marine assets suck, that's 1,800 kilos to a 40-degree GTO. And then an expendable Neutron would be 2,800 kilos to a GTO. So very interesting comparison with the numbers there. And just for comparing that to LEO, low Earth orbit, as a quick refresher for Neutron with RTLS, that's 8,500. Downrange landing is 13,000 and expendable is 15,000. That's to low Earth orbit. So those numbers kind of, the LEO numbers at least, are kind of 50-ish% of what Falcon 9 can do right now. It's a bit hazy because, different inclinations and whether, there are so many things that go into how much stuff you can actually lift into space. But that's the general numbers right now. Rocket Lab is released for Neutron, which is pretty cool. And then, scrolling further down, as I'm doing right now, Rocket Lab also released a very handy graphic which showed the first stage is going to be 2 stages, but it's still going to be 1 stage. So
is that this graphic, Space Mike? Is that this here?
Bear with me on this one, right? So the first stage is going to be split into 2 stages for the purposes of integration. So instead of having the entire first stage vertical in a hangar, or the entire first stage horizontal in a hangar, to allow the payload to be mated into that upper portion there on top of the second stage, which is within the first stage, they're going to be able to split the booster in half. So you'll have the lower module, which will be stacked on the pad, and then you'll have the upper module, which will be able to be hung horizontally in a hangar, have the second stage and the payload integrated horizontally in the hangar. It'll then be rotated, put on a truck, rolled out to the launch site, and stacked on top. So the Neutron is kind of like a Russian doll, as in you'll have the second stage within the first stage, and then the first stage will be able to be split in half, so you can then stack both sides of your first stage on the pad to create a whole rocket, and then that entire first stage will come back with the recovery, with the fairings attached once the second stage has gone on its way. It's a little bit confusing. It's not very traditional, but Rocket Lab obviously thinks it'll work. If not, they wouldn't have designed it. And so yeah, it's going to be pretty exciting to see how Neutron ends up working, because that's one of the keys with both of these vehicles, in my opinion, right? With Sin Falcon 9, they'll bring the first stage back. It's somewhat traditional. You have a first stage, a second stage, fairings, right? Neutron, they're putting the second stage inside the booster. Nova, they're trying to bring both stages back in their own unique way. That's kind of the interesting thing with both of these vehicles in the medium lift category.
And part of the okay, I'm wrapping my head around this. On Neutron, I'm still wrapping my head around. Hang on. Let's go backwards. When you say they break the first stage in half, are they breaking it in half at between the fuel tank and the oxidizer tank, or are you basically saying, because Space Mike, you're like, no. So they're basically sticking the second stage inside the first stage and then slinging that out?
Think of the upper part as a really, really long interstage with a reusable fairing on top that's going to stay on the vehicle so that that interstage and the fairing can still come back with the first stage booster. But the part where it's separated, the lower part that has the landing legs to it, the fuel tanks are all in there. They've kind of squished them in such a way that it'll all be able to fit into that section. And then the upper part that Ryan just awesomely described, that will be on a truck that'll have the upper stage and the payload inside of it. As I said, think of it as a really big interstage. Aside from that upper stage and the payload, the rest of it is essentially an aerodynamic shell in a sense. There's more to it than that, but that's how they can get away with doing this type of construction method.
So okay, so then what it's allowing them to do, forgive my slow brain here, I truly have not been keeping up with this, as you can tell. What that allows them to do then is they're effectively building the first. So you've got your first stage and you've got a really long interstage. The whole of the second stage fits in the interstage, but now that second stage doesn't need all of the normal protections that you would have to have on a traditional second stage. So while their first stage will actually be quite a bit heavier because there's a lot more weight that it's carrying, the second stage can be lighter and less complex and cheaper to build because they're not going to recover their second stage, right? So they're recovering their first stage and then what we'll call the extended inner stage and the clams of the fairings. So then the only thing they're doing is just slinging that last bit out into. This is a interesting approach, right? Because SpaceX is taking the whole rocket needs to be reusable stance with Starship, right? The super heavy booster goes up and it comes back. The Starship goes up and it comes back. The fairings come back with it. This is more of a, hey, we're going to send kind of a skeleton structure up. So we've got the first stage and then kind of a skeleton structure, and then we're not going to have to deal with all of that extra delta V to bleed off our second stage. We're just going to make a lighter and smaller and cheaper second stage that does burn back up. But then they don't have to deal with trying to figure out how to get that second stage back. Is that a fair analysis as to what they're doing?
I would say
Pretty
so.
much.
Yeah. Leave just enough left over to do a deorbit burn or put it in a type of orbit where it'll re-enter quickly.
But they're not recovering their second stage. So, because their second stage is now lighter,
Totally
cheaper, faster, all that other fun jazz. Okay. Then, so that's Neutron. But Nova is fully reusable? What's
Right.
You covered it, but what is Nova's reusability? Nova's Stoke, right?
Yeah, so Stoke Space has really been going down this path of a really unique design with their second stage. As I mentioned earlier, it's one engine, but the engine is also the heat shield. So embedded within the heat shield around the outside, they've got all of these little nozzles, which then all of the plumes from all of those nozzles interact with the geometry of the heat shield in order to create what is effectively an aerospike engine, which means it's super efficient sea level or a little ways up from sea level. At stage separation within the atmosphere, it's super efficient there, and then as they get higher into and eventually out of the atmosphere, it remains super efficient with that second stage engine there, which means that they can go all the way into orbit and then eventually bring that second stage back down for landing, meaning that the entire vehicle will be fully reusable. And because that second stage engine and second stage heat shield is embedded to essentially be the same thing, that means much quicker reusable turnarounds with that second stage because it's all one thing. It's built in. You don't have to worry about having your engines exposed because your engine is your heat shield and your heat shield is your engine, right? So we've seen on Starship, maybe a little bit of tile burn through isn't a great thing. Why do we need to mess around with thousands of tiles when we can just have one heat shield that comes straight in? Heat shield and the engine are the same thing. You don't have to worry about burn throughs. You don't have to worry about engine damage. You don't have to worry about all of these different things. It's one entire structure. It's the same thing, which is really, personally, I think this is really quite an innovative system that Stoke is coming up with here. And you can see there that top little, this is technically their old design, but it looks pretty similar to the current design. You can see that top section, those are the fairings as well. So similar to Neutron, they're going to have a clam fairing system, and the fairings will remain attached to the second stage. So when the second stage comes back, those fairings will come back as well, and you can see that it's going to do a ground pad style Falcon 9-ish landing. So that's pretty cool. And on the newest renders Stoke has put out, they have basically designed, so you can see that second stage, it tapers out like this, right? It's a conical shape, and those nozzles are going to be around the outside of that conical shape. The first stage is going to be slightly thinner than the widest part of that conical shape, which means Stoke will be able to do hot staging without the need for an interstage. Think Starship's hot staging, right? We have the hot staging ring, which is a big shield on top of the booster. The inner Raptor engines fire down, and then that plume goes out there, right? By having the engines physically outside of the bounds of the booster, that means you don't have to mess around with any interstage, any pushers, any deflectors, any heat shields, any of that nonsense, right? The engines will just simply fire outside of the bounds of the booster. And the second stage will then separate because your engines are firing, you don't need any other technology in order to do that. Booster can then flip round, come back and do an RTLS, drone ship, whatever Stoke ends up doing, style landing with its 3 landing legs, which kind of look, they're a bit stubbier and a bit thicker. They kind of look a bit like cartoonish Falcon 9 landing legs in the current renders. But that's what Stoke is planning to do with their first stage. I think there might be a few more iterative development things to do on the first stage, because from the current renders there isn't any RCS and there aren't any aerodynamic surfaces. Historically those have been kind of important in order to bring a booster back, whether we're talking Falcon 9 or New Shepard, so maybe there'll be some more developments on that, but as of the current design they're doing hot staging without any need for an interstage or those historic kind of triangular truss structures the Soviets used, that kind of thing.
So I was actually, for many, many years, a huge fan of Aerospike. And then, because I was like, this makes so much sense, right? Because not a lot of people realize that, a engine that is optimized for sea level will not do very well in a non-pressurized area, something that doesn't have pressure to kind of push that plume down. And then the reverse is true. Like a vacuum engine does not work well at sea level, and a sea level engine does not work well in vacuum, but in theory, on paper, an Aerospike engine works well in all of them. And then Tim Dodd, the everyday astronaut, came out with this frankly amazing Aerospike video, and he basically, I don't want to say debunked, but was like, actually, this doesn't make a ton of sense. And NRJ says the same thing I thought, which is I thought Aerospike didn't make sense. So that begs the question. The reason it didn't make sense is because the weight necessary to build out that Aerospike engine, nulled out all of the benefits. It's kind of like a hydrolox engine, right? Hydrogen, liquid oxygen, on paper, those engines are going to be, their ISP is going to be crazy. But the amount of weight that you need to put into containing that liquid hydrogen is so insane. It's so complicated and hard to contain that liquid hydrogen, you lose most, if not all, of the benefits of that hydrolox engine. And Aerospec seem to have a similar issue. So I guess my question to the group is Stoke Space's, because it's like one engine with a series of nozzles. Did they
Correct.
overcome this weight problem, or did they just build the weight problem? How are they able to be successful in Aerospike when no one else has before?
Personally, I think it's the integration with the heat shield, because it's not necessarily like they've gone out to build an Aerospike engine. They've built an engine that surrounds a heat shield that happens to create the Aerospike effect. That's essentially what has happened with this engine. Yeah, so it's not like they've gone, we need to build an Aerospike for upper stage. They've gone, well, if we put these nozzles around the heat shield, it happens to make an Aerospike effect that could be useful. That's kind of seems like the route that they've gone down here, as in the geometry of the heat shield doubles up, that you can use it as a heat shield, and it increases the efficiency of those engines. And then you've also removed the need of a side-mounted heat shield, and then having engines in the middle of your heat shield, or having some kind of heat shield that covers your engines. It integrates everything together into one structure.
And a comment that was just brought up, and I guess I should ask this because I didn't before. What is the fuel for Nova, and what is the fuel for Neutron?
For Nova, it's kind of similar to Blue Origin's rocket, where the first stage is going to be a Methalox engine, but the upper stage is going to be a Hydrolox. So, pretty interesting.
So wait. Hang
Yep.
on. The argument
Yep.
I just made, where hydrogen doesn't make sense due to the weight, and aerospike doesn't make sense due to the weight, they decided to
doing
do
both.
both? Okay. Okay.
And
Yikes.
Absolutely 100% guarantee you that Stoke Space was sitting around and designed bullpen one day. It was just like, hey, have you heard of Jamie before? And she really doesn't think that Hydrolox or aerospike engines would work. So how can we make both of them work together? I know.
Hang on. It's not that I don't. It's not that I don't think they'll work. Like, again, on paper, they're both amazing. It's that everything is an engineering trade, right? And by the time you make the engineering trades to make either one of those things work, they no longer make as much sense on paper. But if they found a way to make different engineering trades, which it sounds like they did, because what I'm hearing you guys say is it's not actually an aerospike engine. It's like aerospike adjacent, right? It's kind of like
what Ryan said.
Aerospike-esque.
Accidental aerospike engine.
right,
Okay,
it creates
yeah.
the effect, but it's not an Aerospike. Not really.
Yeah, because an arrow. Can someone call up an image of an aerospike engine? Because that's a good point. It doesn't actually look like an aerospike engine. I think there are two ways to do it, but the one you normally
no
see kind of
spike.
has this. There is
Yeah.
no spike, right?
With
Yeah.
a traditional aerospike engine, you have a literal spike in it. Right?
Yeah, it comes
and that's
down to
where
kind
the
of a-
exhaust is pushing against, and that's how you end up getting your efficiency, because no matter what altitude you're at or whatever pressure, ambient pressure is around you, it's pushing on the spike. It's not pushing on the bell or atmosphere around you in order to do it. What this seems like they're doing is that they basically have everything. They have the nozzles aimed in a specific way that the geometry of the exhaust coming off of it, maybe recirculation or something in that exhaust, ends up generating that spike, but in
think
a
this is-
physical sense. So not in the traditional sense, like I could see in our preview one, we have the linear aerospike. Sorry, I'm so used to saying aerospike.
Yeah. Okay. So what's on the
that's
screen
so-
right now is what I think of when I think of an aerospike engine, right? That
that-
kind of like
yes.
literal spike that kind of comes, that hand movement I was trying to make, right? That comes
Yes.
down.
Yes, and those were, by the way, that engine is a real engine that was developed for NASA's X-33 program, and that was making something on the order of I want to say a couple 100,000 pounds of thrust when they were testing it. So, like, that is not a small engine. That's pretty big.
Okay. All right. So this all makes sense. This is actually all really kind of exciting. I guess the next question is, how real are these things? I feel like, and maybe this is just me being biased, I feel like Rocket Lab is going to deliver. They've delivered before in the past. They have a history of delivering. So I feel like Neutron is going to be a thing. Everyone agree? That seemed fairly reasonable?
Progress seems
I-
going well. Their engine tests are going well. Sorry, Ryan. Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say that I agree as well. With Sin Engine, I believe it's at Stennis, they have engines on the stand testing them. They've popped a second stage tank already in their cryoproofing. They've been building fairings with Sin. They've been sharing pictures of them building these carbon fiber structures, and they seem to be, at least keeping going financially. It doesn't seem like they're crying for help. So Rocket Lab seems to be a company that it seems like they'll be able to do it as well. And I think Stoke are probably going to be all right in the first, going into the future. Short term, they seem like they're going to be okay. They just recently announced they concluded another funding round. They've got a few $100 million that's come into the company over the last few years. They're developing that picture we were showing earlier of Andromeda, which is the name of that heat shielding engine for Stoke's upper stage. That's a real engine that's on their test stand right now in Washington. That's going through testing. That's real hardware they've built. They've built a real subscale version of their vehicles, first and second stages. They've built actual hardware. They've tested actual hardware. They're working on actual hardware. This isn't some render that a small group has put out. Stoke Space are full of founded by a former Blue Origin engineer, right, who worked on the BE4 program. Stoke is full of people who know what they're doing. They're just a small company with a kind of innovative, unique theory on how to achieve fully reusable medium rocketry.
So Ryan, you think Stoke? It sounds like Jared. What was your opinion on Neutron, by the way? Right, like.
There's no reason to doubt Rocket Lab whatsoever in their abilities. Peter Beck is the kind of guy who, when he says something, it happens. So, I am looking forward to seeing a Neutron launch. That's my opinion on it.
Peter Beck is also a guy that he says something won't happen and then it does happen. So
He did eat his hat. He did eat his hat.
He was a man of his word.
Space Mike, you said you thought Neutron would happen. So Space Mike, your opinion on Nova then?
For Nova, I mean, I want to believe that it'll happen. As of right now, I don't really have anything to say that, they're going to fail completely. As Ryan brought up, I'm extremely encouraged that they have built subscale demonstrators, that they've tried little hop tests, that they have their own engine testing facility in Washington where they're testing out all these engines and, have shared not all, but, quite a bit of footage of those tests, and things seem to be going well with it. And if they're successful, what they're hoping for is it would just barely be at the lower end of a medium lift launch vehicle. If they're doing the 100% reusable for the first and second stages, they would be around 3,000 kilograms into low Earth orbit. But they do have stuff that they have pushed before, saying that we can do a fully expendable version, like the fully expendable Falcon Heavy. And if they did that, then it would be around 7,000 kilograms to low Earth orbit, and that opens up some possibilities. I definitely believe that Neutron is going to fly eventually. Whether it's going to be this summer or later this year or early next year is all just a matter of time and yet to be seen. But I'm really encouraged by the tests that Stoke Space has been doing. I've watched a couple of interviews with their CEO Andy Lapsa, and I think that they've got the right mentality and are, have that kind of SpaceX scrappiness of, can we eliminate things and figure out the best way to do this, and getting like commercially available equipment. And I mean, even the first stage of this is, even though it's way smaller, using stainless steel, kind of like what SpaceX is doing with Starship, I find really interesting. So I think that they've got the right mentality, and I'm certainly rooting for them. Whether or not I can 100% say that they're going to succeed, I don't know yet, but I'm a lot more encouraged by what Stoke Space is putting out than some of their competitors.
You said that they have SpaceX scrappiness. Do they have SpaceX sense of urgency as well? Right? Because that's one of the things I think that holds Blue Origin back, is they just don't have that sense of urgency. They're just like, yeah, we'll get to it someday. And then, 20 years later, they make orbit. Right?
Right. I want to say yes. They claimed that they have customers and people who are extremely interested in getting a ride on their Nova rocket. They haven't disclosed any customers yet, but that could be anything. And they might even do what several other companies have done and transition to try to get defense contracts and launch stuff for the Space Force or, even the National Reconnaissance Office. So, but I do think that there is a sense of urgency, only because in some of those interviews with Andy Lapsa, talking about how, if like he brought up lots of examples about Kuiper Space and OneWeb and even EchoStar, of like, if they don't get going on their constellations now, they're going to completely miss out on satellite internet business. So, I think that he's at least aware of this sort of stuff, and without having an inside look at really what they're doing, the vibe that they're giving off is that they do have a sense of urgency.
So that brings me kind of to my next question, which is like, okay, both companies seem like they've got viable technology. They both got funding, which is kind of a big thing, right? No Bucks, no Buck Rogers. Aerospike says. It's ironic that I just made, I know, right?
User Aerospike.
Yeah, I know. It's confusing. Stoke's development has been crazy fast. So, I mean, that's really good. Just as an aside, just thinking about their second stage coming back, that they're kind of coming back in a gumdrop shape, right? And like physics loves the gumdrop shape for capsules coming back into our atmosphere. Like just straight up physics, that's the shape that physics wants to come back in. So just mentally, this makes sense. Just like looking at it, it's like, oh yeah, you've done a gumdrop. The question is it a little too long, right? Because, well, we'll see. We'll cover that later. But my real question is like, okay, so we think they're viable. They're both building things that we both think that they can do this. Is there a market for it? Like we look at Falcon 9. Falcon 9 is not a medium lifter, right? Falcon 9 is technically a heavy lift.
Technically a heavy lifter. It started off as a medium lifter, but it's technically a heavy lifter now.
But the medium lifter isn't the thing, the version that was a medium lifter isn't the thing that changed aerospace. It's the heavy lifter that changed aerospace. It's the heavy lifter that does the transporter missions. It's the heavy lifter that does the Starship missions. It's Falcon 9 heavy lifter that is dominating the aerospace industry today. Dominating it. Is there room in the market for a medium lift launcher, or are these guys thinking too small? Jared, start with you.
I think there is, and I think there is because not everybody wants to ride on a flight with 50 other satellites in order to get their things into orbit. Some people do want dedicated launches for themselves, like the Department of Defense or the National Reconnaissance Office. They're definitely big on flying solo and making sure that nobody else is on board with them. In addition to that, I imagine that upcoming in the future, in the very near future as well, once satellite internet constellations become an everyday thing, replenishment of them is going to be a near constant as well. And that is exactly what Neutron is made for. I mean, didn't Peter Beck say that it is optimized for satellite constellation delivery, right? I believe that was one of his spoken selling points on Neutron. Was that
I was going to challenge you. I was going to challenge you on satellite replenishment, but I think I misunderstood. So for clarity, when you say satellite replenishment, you mean these next generation satellites that are designed for like 5, 7, 10 years, and they fall back, and they're these huge mega constellations of thousands of satellites. You have to replenish. You have to put new satellites back in. I interpreted what you said, which was kind of space shuttle era of, we'll just send a space shuttle up and refuel the satellite, and then off we go. And I was going to say, well, I mean, we proved that no one wants that, and it doesn't make sense.
Although, why not? Let's do a bunch of space tugs. Although that makes sense for geosynchronous orbit, not necessarily low Earth orbit, right?
Doesn't make,
or at least where it does make more sense, I guess we'll say geosynchronous orbit than low Earth orbit.
Does it though? Does it make any sense at all? Because it costs nearly as much to go up and replenish your satellite as it does just to put a brand new one up there. So just put the new one up that has the new technology. That's 10 years newer.
If you can make it cheaper.
Sure. I mean, that would be the big thing.
On that.
Yeah. All right.
So,
The only other reason why that
if you can make it cheaper, that goes for anything, right? So, but I think that there is a market for both of these rockets here, simply because of the fact that, one, there are groups that want dedicated flights. There are people that do not want to fly with anyone else, whether that be for operational purposes or the orbits that they're going to or things like that. There are people who want to fly solo. And then secondly, these rockets, especially something like Neutron, they're being purpose-built. There's a specific reason, and it is the future of what we're seeing in space flight right now, and they're very much hitting right for the gap of where you want that ball to go, and let's see what happens.
Space Mike, your thoughts? Like, is there a market here? Right? Well, actually, and the other thing I should have asked is there not just a market here for a medium lifter? Is there a market for 2 or more medium lifters?
I think there is. In the short term, there are quite a few companies who want to do the satellite internet constellations and other types of constellations, whether it be Earth observation or multispectral bands that are looking for specific things, like satellites designed to monitor wildfires, or satellites that are specifically looking at crop rotation for farmers. And there, I believe too that if we do continue with the Artemis program, there's going to be, even more demand for communication satellites around the moon. Same goes for Mars, and having a network, a relay to be able to bounce everything back and forth so that we can be in constant communication with stuff. In the long term, I think that, yes, SpaceX has been dominating the market with Falcon 9, but they are busy. Like they're booked for quite some time. And I think that there is a lot of opportunities to have other types of rideshare missions for a lot of these smaller satellites, whether it be student projects or, test experiment demonstrations. There's lots of things going on in the Space Force world and the DARPA world of just testing new types of technologies. And I think that if we do, I personally would love to see something where we are penalizing companies for space junk, and that would enable more space tug type of stuff to happen. But even if that doesn't happen, if NASA continues with the LEO destination program to create another space station in low Earth orbit to continue the type of national lab experiments that we do there in collaboration with our international partners, then we're going to need cargo delivery and we're going to need crew delivery for quite some time. And it seems to me, I could be wrong about this, but it seems to me like SpaceX wants to phase out the Falcon 9 rocket and Falcon Heavy and kind of move everything over towards Starship. And if we do have another crewed space station in low Earth orbit, they're going to need crew and cargo deliveries for quite some time. And it would be a real shame if, SpaceX does retire Falcon 9 or even their Crew Dragons. And that would kind of open up the door for even more competition to get into the crude delivery business as well. Manufacture their own capsules. There's going to be a need for those types of rocket classes to deliver that amount of payload. And, medium lift is defined as somewhere between 2,000 to 20,000 kilograms. Into low Earth orbit. So I think that there's going to be a need for that for quite some time, at least looking 10 to 15 years out.
The way you worded, like sure would be a shame if Falcon 9 was kind of like a gangster mobster of you. Sure would be a shame if Falcon 9 wasn't flying anymore.
Oh, I didn't mean it like that. I didn't mean it like
no,
that.
No, I know.
I'm not a ULA sniper.
Is there still an X account that's ULA Sniper? It's fine. Ryan, your thoughts. Is there a market for medium lift launchers or two of them? And then someone even brought up, relativity space, right?
Real quick,
Oh, yeah.
Sunrai has a great thing too. There's also asteroid defense. Medium lift rockets might be right for launching kinetic impactors. Great point.
Relevant timing. Really relevant timing.
Yep.
Yeah.
Good timing on that thought.
Yeah.
Sorry, Ryan.
I am going to agree with Jared and Mike. I think there is a market for these, especially also we've got relativity coming in, but we don't exactly know how far along they are. They haven't really shown off any hardware except for hardware which isn't theirs. Anyways, talking about Neutron and Nova, I think Neutron, how should I word this? I think Neutron definitely has the opportunity, just because it is, at least in theory, capable of lifting more mass into space. I think it is going to be more successful of the two in terms of up mass. However, with Stoke, this is Stoke's first rocket, right? And SpaceX started small, Rocket Lab started small, Relativity started, everyone starts small, then scales up, right? This is Stoke's first rocket. This is going to be a smaller rocket. Let's not disregard what they could do in the future. Imagine a Nova-style rocket at a huge scale, right? This could be kind of crazy if you think about it. And notice I said up mass earlier, right? There's going to be down mass with Nova as well. They're going to be able to collect stuff from space and bring it back to Earth. Collect satellites, bring it back to Earth. That's going to be a key component of the Nova architecture. And now you might say, well, they said they were going to do that with the space shuttle and it didn't actually work and they didn't actually end up doing it, right? They said they do a lot of stuff with the space shuttle and most of it didn't work. They said it was a reusable vehicle, it was a refurbishable vehicle. Like, we're not talking about the space shuttle anymore. We're talking about going into the future. And I think down mass could be something pretty cool. And Aravale, I'm sure Stoke is already going to be reaching out to you to get them to join the marketing team, because Supernova, think about it. It works. Think about it. It works.
Actually, you bring up an interesting point that I hadn't thought of. I think we're kind of winding down on this one, but just out of curiosity, the group seems to be most excited about Stoke and Nova. Is that a fairly safe assumption? Like, is everyone just not that Neutron is not exciting, but like everyone, it feels like Stoke is doing things that no one's done before, and that just kind of excites us space nerds. Is that fair?
You know, I feel like it's
how it works.
I feel like it's the fulfillment of the promise when we all got excited 10 years ago about a reusable Falcon 9 upper stage, and then they abandoned that. So I'm super excited to see a fully reusable rocket.
Didn't abandon it. They just moved it to Starship.
Oh, right.
Full reuse is the holy grail of rocketry, and to see anyone willingly pursuing that is great. And I cannot wait.
Awesome. All right. I'm curious to know what you in the community think. Leave your comments below. Are you excited for medium lift launchers? Or is this kind of like I'm more excited for the super, we need to come up with a new classification, right? Because you've got medium lift, heavy lift, and super heavy lift. And then what's below medium lift? Just lift rockets, light lift rockets? I don't even know.
Small lift.
Yeah, small lift.
Small lift. So you have small lift, medium lift, heavy lift, super heavy lift, and then that's it. So, Falcon Heavy is a super heavy lift rocket. The Saturn V is a super heavy lift rocket. The Starship is a super heavy lift rocket. If they triple the size of Starship, I'm not saying they would, but let's just say they did. They tripled the up mass of Starship. That's still just a super heavy lift rocket, right? We need something like super ultra heavy lift, super giga lift rockets. Exactly. Anyhow, we need a new classification. Redonkullift rocket. Are you excited for the medium lift rockets? And then who do you think is going to kind of dominate? Because there's probably going to be one of these providers, one or two, that's going to dominate the industry. Is it going to be the Neutron and Nova? Is it going to be, Relativity's in there too? Like, who's going to dominate this market? Or is there even a market? Do you think that the heavy lift launchers are going to just bleed away all of the possible market from the medium lift launchers? Because everything seems to be kind of moving up in scale. Leave your comments below. I've been reviewing them. You'll see that we were doing a whole bunch of comments on YouTube and on X as well. And also we'll be posting these shows to X. So certainly let us know wherever you want to. On that note, I think it's time to move on. We're going to try something new. We've got our Game Master, Ryan. We've got a little bit of a competition. Chat room is between the combined chat room and all of the hosts. We're going to have a trivia question. The chat room is going to have the ability to answer said trivia question using hashtags. However, whatever the collective chat room decides, so whatever the winning answer in the chat room is, that is the global answer for all of chat as to whether you actually got that right or wrong. So make sure you answer as best you can. It does only apply to those of you watching live, so and more encouragement to watch live. And then each host has to answer independently. And so it's each individual host against the chat room. And then we will be keeping tally of this throughout the year, and we will see who the overall winner is of these trivia questions at the end of the year. So this will be fun and interesting. So we're going to start with our first poll question, and Ryan will help take this away.
Everybody, true or false? Bill Nelson is not Bill Nelson's name.
All right, for the chat room, you've got 30 seconds. Start voting, hashtag true or hashtag false. You have to include the hashtag. Your vote will work on X. It will also work on YouTube. Once the music runs out, your votes no longer count. So hashtag true or hashtag false. And I don't know why it's not updating because a whole bunch of you have already... Oh, there we go. Cool.
Oh, there we go.
Just takes a second. You're almost out. I have to remember to go into the poll and turn off voting. All right. That's it.
The results are in.
Results are in. So the chat room thinks overall false. The chat room has voted false. Bill Nelson is not Bill's... I'm going to vote true. That is not Bill Nelson's name. Space Mike, what do you vote?
I'm going with the chat room and saying false.
False. Jared?
I'm going to go with false. I'm going to go with
False.
chat room.
So the chat room and 2 hosts both say false. So you're all saying Bill Nelson is his real name. I'm saying it is not. Game Master.
The statement, Bill Nelson is not Bill Nelson's name, is true. His actual name is Clarence William Nelson II.
Aha.
So Jamie
Gotcha.
and chat room.
Got one. Wow.
Jamie got one.
Give me my
Huzzah!
buzz. Give me
That
my
was
buzz.
a good one,
Give me my-
Ryan. You stumped us.
Yeah, that was pretty great. Well done. All right, moving on to our next topic. A little palate cleanser in between topics. Rigged. Love it. SphereX is a upcoming mission coming out of Vandenberg. It's Jared. What's going on?
Yeah, so SphereX is a mission coming from NASA. It's a new near-infrared space telescope, and it's got a great backronym for its name. You ready to hear what its actual name is? And
Oh yeah.
I had to write it down because I'm not remembering this. So it's the spectrophotometer for the history of the universe, epic of reionization, and ICE's Explorer mission. So that's what it's going to do. It's going to be an all-sky survey looking in over 100 different wavelengths of near-infrared, and there are 3 major things that it's looking for. One is this finding more information on something called inflation, which is our early universe when it suddenly got really big, really fast in a really short amount of time. The next is that it is going to measure the overall glow, like the overall light output of galaxies near us. And then also the one that I'm actually really excited about is that it's going to study the building blocks of life and the distribution of them in our own Milky Way galaxy. So it's looking for water and carbon dioxide, but locally, and how that is distributed on a very small scale, or basically on a scale over the size of the Milky Way galaxy, as opposed to looking at galaxy clusters very far away. So 3 really cool things that it's going to be doing. And of course, Jamie, you've always got a big question whenever we talk anything astronomy. What do you always like to say to me?
Jared, this sounds painfully boring. Why should I care? Why does this matter? Snooze.
Yes. So, of course, anytime astronomy is brought up, people always say, why does it matter? And I guess it's understandable for the oldest science in human history, one of the most influential, to be asked, why does it matter? So, why does the sun rising in the sky every day matter to anyone? And you know what? I agree. No, I'm just kidding. This matters because studying things like inflation helps us overall study the physics of the universe. We live in the universe, right? We have to obey the laws of physics in the universe. You could disobey them. I don't think anyone's successfully done that yet. Usually it's because the universe physics police show up and it doesn't end well for anybody. But you can study what's going on locally around us by looking at the universe as a whole, or even looking further back. And that can have implications for the design of technology that we're working on, for our understanding of the applications of things that we may be working on right now, even things that we've learned in the past. So it is one of those things where it does feel very esoteric. It does feel very like, what's the point of this? Where exactly am I ever going to use this? But at the same time, trying to understand the basic laws of physics and understand why they work, how they work, where they started working, ends up enhancing our ability to understand them and add them to the practical applications that we already do with them every day. Like, if we didn't understand physics, electricity, as a whole, like with you watching us right now, wouldn't work particularly well, right? Like, we'd still be living in the dark ages at this point, and it wouldn't be a very fun way to be living, if you ask me personally. So,
I'm gonna wait. I'm gonna challenge you on that one, right? Like, we didn't need astronomy to figure out electricity, right? Like, was Tesla an astronomer and he used astronomy to figure out? That doesn't track. Try again. Shenanigans.
I'm saying that these things that sound esoteric, these things that sound like they don't have any practical application anywhere, end up having very big implications down the road, right? So when the electron was discovered, how do you think people were feeling at that time? They're probably like, oh, cool, another subatomic particle. Yeah, whatever. Very nice. It's got a charge. Yeah, okay, neat. Like, well, what could you do with it? Well, it turns out we can do a ton with them, right? We can do a whole bunch of things with electrical charges. And I mean, when electricity was discovered in overall understood as well as we can, at that point it was, oh well, what could you do with this? Like, neat, yeah. I mean, we need to think about the idea that you could use gates, right? And then you could use these gates to make a 0 and a 1, and then you could use those zeros and ones to do very important things in your life. So, right? And Man of Sand has a really good point, which is that we can name rockets after them. So if you wanted to, with Stoke Space's Nova or something, we could have another rocket coming up. Oh, we have a rocket coming, the epic of reionization. How awesome would that be?
So your argument, for clarity, your argument isn't that like, oh, we understand electricity better. Your argument is like, when we first found electricity, we didn't understand what to do with it. And then it was many, many, many years later where it was actually like, oh, we can do some pretty cool things here. And then many years later, it's completely and totally reshaped and changed society as we know it. And now electricity is considered a basic human need. Is that
yes.
fair?
Actually,
okay.
Yeah, we just never know in these kinds of studies of things as to where the practical applications of it are going to end up with it. So if you want to do something advanced, you need to take that step forward in order to find it, right? So that's where missions like this come in very, very handy. And they help us understand the universe as a whole, which is very important if you're trying to figure out big questions about the universe, and also if you're trying to figure out your place in the universe, and also if you're trying to figure out how exactly to maybe do things in the universe that are not currently possible as what we would be considered in theory or things like that. So again, this is sort of, is it pie in the sky kind of stuff? Yeah, it is esoteric and it is out there, but at the same time, there's something to be said about basic research being a fundamental part of exploration, and this is one of those missions where it does that. And there are things also that this mission is doing that we just haven't been able to do yet. And we finally have the technology to do it, and SphereX is going to let us do that. So one of them is that measuring the collective glow from galaxies all around the universe. So before, you would use something like Hubble or something to measure the brightness of maybe like a cluster of galaxies. But SphereX is going to look at the whole sky, and it's going to do so about 4 times throughout its mission. And from that, we'll figure out the brightness of it. And we already have a very interesting data point, which is that the New Horizons spacecraft, the one that flew by Pluto, we actually had it look at the brightness of the sky all the way far out, and way beyond out Pluto, where it doesn't have to deal with the dust, that scattering light inside of our solar system like we have to deal with here at Earth. And we found that it's actually not as bright as we were expecting that far out. So why is that? Where do we get the answers from that? Well, SphereX could provide that knowledge to help us answer that question. So again, this is a mission that's being done to do those sort of like that basic foundational knowledge for things that can lead to bigger and better discoveries, and then also trying to complement things that we know of right now, big questions that we may have. So hopefully that kind of clarifies the who, what, where, when, and why should we care of SphereX.
And it's launching soon, right?
Yeah, it's actually going to be launching, believe next Thursday, the 27th of February. And because it is going from Vandenberg, and in the evening, I'm going to try to get up there and watch it. So, but we'll see. So,
is there any?
I want to go.
Do it. You go already. Don't you? Don't you go up there all the time? You bring the fog with you.
I used to, and then my Jeep became a Jeep. So, so there's that. Also, I do want to mention that it is launching another mission called Punch with it at the same time. It's to be several small sats. They're going to observe the sun. They're going to be looking at the area of where the sun's atmosphere transitions from solar atmosphere to solar wind, trying to figure out why it does that. What are the mechanisms behind that? And then how does the solar system interact with that? And that one, I have a definitely great answer for the who cares about that one. And that one is basically space weather. So if you don't want your satellites to get fried or have your stuff get destroyed or radio blackouts, other things like that, you need to understand space weather. And man, there's nothing better than a mission to try to understand space weather to get you that knowledge. So again, that space weather, if you ask me, is super important, especially if we are going to have humans leaving the Earth. Then it becomes a fundamental thing we need to fundamentally understand. Like, we need to understand it at a level of actual, like 7 to 10 day forecast weather here on Earth that we get, you know? Like, you pull up your weather app and you see what you got for the next 10 days. It'd be nice to be able to do something like that for the next 3 days in space. So,
You know, for anyone interested in space weather, Dr. Tamitha Skov actually has an amazing YouTube channel and she does space weather predictions. And I fundamentally agree with you, Jared. It's one of those things that we don't think about a whole lot, but it has, not only does it influence satellites in space that, you know, you're directly connecting to, right? Also, it can impact weather and elements here on Earth, right? Everything on Earth goes back to the sun, and space weather is basically looking at the sun and going, what's going on there, what's coming towards Earth, how is that going to impact things here? So
yeah.
Absolutely. And in our future, our look to tomorrow, you know, Blue Origin has a cislunar economy they want to do. SpaceX is looking to get to Mars. To your point, Jared, space weather is going to dictate when we can launch, where we can launch from, and how we get those astronauts there safely, because a solar flare that whips towards something, that could be bad for us giant ugly bags of mostly water, as well as the vehicles themselves. Those giant giant ugly bags of mostly water. Star Trek, for those who don't know.
Yeah, and you know, I think you gotta, if you need to, if you need a great example of that, there was a batch of Starlink satellites that were launched in February of 2022, and they got rocked by a solar storm just after launch. And that ended up taking out 38 of the 49 Starlink satellites that were a part of that launch. So, yeah, you kind of gotta pay attention to things like that. And actually, I hate to, kind of say it this way, but those Starlink satellites getting launched and then getting fried by that geomagnetic storm in 2022 actually gave us a tremendous amount of data in terms of like our understanding of space weather and the development of predictions and being able to figure out how things work. So it wasn't like their sacrifice was in vain. It was, okay, look, I don't want to call it good, but we got something good out of it, at least, even though Starlink lost 38 satellites out of 49 that were launched. So bad for Starlink, but like several papers were written about that, and we actually really did get some good out of that.
What excites you most about the SphereX launch, or I'm sorry, not the launch, but the SphereX mission itself?
It's just trying to figure out this very early part of our universe. There's so much. Well, I always like to say there's so much of so little that we know about everything, because we really genuinely don't know much about the universe. We're very confident in what we know, but then what we know is not a lot. So anytime we get to go to a very important time in our understanding of the universe, such as inflation, that moment when the universe just was like, just came very quickly, very small space to very big space, much, much faster than we expected it to. That getting into the bleeding edge stuff like that and really trying to get down to the fundamentals of what it is, that's the kind of stuff that excites me. And then also this look for the building blocks of life as well, like water and carbon dioxide, and doing that on a galactic scale as opposed to a a stellar scale. So looking at it across the entire Milky Way and not just local stars or local clouds of gas. That's really exciting to me too, because we've always wondered, life, is there life out there? That's a really big question. But we've never really looked for the ingredients in a macro scale as opposed to a focus scale. So this first attempt to really take it all in terms of hunting for the ingredients for life, instead of a narrow beam focus, we've now got the whole sky to look at several times over. I honestly, I'm almost more excited for that than I am for the fundamental inflation question that is trying to be answered here.
And so, forgive my ignorance, but with the fundamental inflation question, does that go towards, I remember when I was growing up, there was the Big Bang, and then we were going to have the big crunch, right? Because gravity was going to suck everything back together. And then we did some more math and some more science and ran some more numbers and realized, nope, actually things are moving at a level where the big crunch probably won't happen. But there's something there we don't understand. And I think we named it dark matter or just dark energy or whatever. Like there's this ether we don't there's something that we didn't understand that I don't think we still understand. Right?
Yeah, that's dark energy. Basically, we figured that if your universe is dominated by matter, there should be a point where it stops going outwards and it starts to come back in, and that would cause a big crunch. We have looked out there and we've seen the evidence that basically says that not only did the universe continue, but it's actually accelerating at some point 5 to 6 billion years ago. Whatever is doing it stepped on the accelerator pedal, and it's actually been accelerating since. And we don't know why it would do that, and that's called dark energy. Dark energy doesn't mean it's some sort of energy that we can't see. It doesn't mean that it's a type of matter. It doesn't even mean it's a type of energy. It is literally just two words that we use as a placeholder for I don't know. So we'll have to see what dark energy actually is. We don't know. But figuring out what inflation is, so a period where in almost an instantaneous event, the universe became very, very big, very, very quickly. That could end up helping us have a very big piece of the puzzle, or it could solve the puzzle, frankly, in looking for what dark energy is. We never know what is going to be that piece of the puzzle with it there. And if we find that piece of the puzzle, that's going to be very, very big for our understanding of the universe, which can then fall into physics, which can then change a lot of things that we might be working with every single day of our lives. That would be fantastic to have that kind of a result go down. So I would want that.
I think that was the point I was going to try to make, which is, we don't know what dark energy is. We don't know why we're still expanding, right? Because we should be shrinking, we should, but we're not going to, as far as we can tell. And so there's something out there we don't understand. And once we get an understanding of that, maybe we can get to a closer understanding of how to create or control gravity, or whatever the case may be, right? Like I'm stretching here, I'm grasping for things, but we don't know what it could potentially create. And it could be yet another thing that completely and totally revolutionizes society itself.
Yes.
Or not. Yeah, it could be nothing too. Could be nothing.
It could also be nothing, It could be turtles all the way down for all we know. But at the same time, that's kind of the way it goes. So we'll have to see. So.
All right. Thank you, Jared. Go ahead.
Quickly, when Jared first said that NASA was going to be launching a telescope to monitor inflation, I thought, why does NASA need to look at the price of eggs and bacon? But it's nice to see that they're actually, doing proper science in space.
Yes, we are. We're trying our best with that. There's a lot. As you can imagine, it's been a very busy time period for everybody. So we're just making sure to pull our share as well.
And a huge thank you to Dave Avery, as every week gifts 5 memberships to people. So if you just became a brand new member, congratulations. You'll be able to join us in our member show. The member show that will be happening after this one. But before we get into that show, we've got one more topic and one more poll. Game Master, are you ready? Hosts,
let's go.
Are you ready?
Absolutely.
Yep. Chat room, here we go. Here's your question.
Oh, this is one from the first story, which is why I ordered it this way, so you'd have to actually think about it. And I very purposely didn't actually mention this number at all within that segment. How many nozzles does Andromeda, that's the engine heat shield for the second stage on the Nova rocket, how many nozzles does Andromeda have? Is it 14, 20, 24, or 32? People are already voting.
Well, I'm starting the 30-second music.
But let's go anyway. So, as most of you have already figured out, hashtag 14, hashtag 20, hashtag 24, hashtag 32.
And hosts, get your answer ready. Actually, as we're waiting for the chat room to finish up, Space Mike, what's your answer?
My answer is 24.
24. Jared, what's your answer?
I'm also going with 24.
I'm going to go with 32. So, all right. It looks like the chat room is really going around 24 here. There you go. So the chat room has chosen 24. Ooh, it changed at the very end there, but 24. So, Ryan. So wait. Once again, hang on. I just want to clarify. Last round, the chat room and absolutely everybody agreed, and you are all wrong. This round, the chat room and everyone but me agreed. Ryan, take it away.
So the answer for how many nozzles does Andromeda have is 24. So the chat room...
No, answer's 32. 32.
No. In fact, the design has never had 32 nozzles. The original design had 30. The new design has 24. So 32 is doubly wrong. Yeah. 24 is the correct answer. So well done, chat room.
No, never tell the chat room they've done well. It will go to their head. No good will come of that. Never give the chat room.
Good job, chat room. You guys are awesome.
Stop it.
Good job.
No good will come of that.
Keep it up. Keep it up, chat room. Keep it up.
All right. Our last segment for the show is talking about, there's a little bit of a shuffle going on at the International Space Station. Who wants to take this one?
I'll take this. I'll try to keep this brief as well. There's been quite a bit of drama about the stranded and abandoned astronauts that were never stranded and never abandoned, but we all agree that the CST-100 Starliner, that Boeing space capsule, sucks, and that NASA made the correct decision when they decided to fly Starliner back without Sonny and Butch on board because they had more thruster issues when they undocked from the space station, and they were able to land successfully and land on target, but there were still enough issues that they weren't confident with the safety of the vehicle. So they launched Crew 9, which is a SpaceX Dragon capsule that had 2 of its 4 crew members stay behind on Earth so that there would be seats available for Sonny and Butch. I can't say his name right now.
Butch.
Sonny and Butch to return home safely. And so with that little bit of switch up, they are now looking at the next crew mission, which is Crew 10, to send the next 4 astronauts up to the International Space Station. And they originally were planning on using one of the new Dragons, the last of the new Dragons that is currently in the hatchery. And supposedly its egg has cracked, but there's still a little bit of goo and eggshell on it. It's not completely hatched just yet. And that new baby dragon doesn't even have a name yet. And I really like the tradition that they have where the first, commander on the first crew that flies on these dragon capsules gets to name it. So this new capsule, we don't know exactly what the issues are, but they need a little bit more time in order to do their qualification testings and make sure that everything is going to operate successfully. And we are totally okay with that because you want to make sure, even though they've been flying now a couple of times, I mean, this will be I believe this is the 13th or 14th crewed mission on a SpaceX Dragon capsule, but because this is a brand new vehicle, we want to make sure that everything is working out well. So what they're going to do is with Crew 10, instead of launching on this new one and delaying sending the crew up to the space station, they are switching to the Endurance capsule, which is the second of the Crew Dragon capsules that they started flying. And the reason that they're doing that is so that Crew 9 can bring Sonny and Butch home sooner than planned. Right now, Crew 10 is scheduled to launch around March 12th, and after they arrive at the space station, the Crew 9 capsule, which right now is the Freedom capsule, will be able to undock from the space station and return back to Earth and bring them home from what should have been only a couple of day trip, which is turned into several months. And in the meantime, they will continue to do the work that they need on this new Dragon, which it's looking like the first flight for that might be the Axiom 4 mission. So Peggy Whitson, the space ninja herself, might be the one who gets to name this new baby dragon, which might be pretty cool.
Yeah. I think it's very interesting to have Axiom 4 fly as the maiden mission on that Dragon. I'm trying to think back now. I can't exactly remember, but I'm pretty sure all the other Dragons, their first flight was a NASA
flight.
A NASA flight, right? We had Demo 2 and then Crew 1. I'm not sure all the other ones, but I think they've all been NASA ones before. So definitely interesting, and also kind of, signifying a changing of how these crew missions are going forwards with the entire commercial industry, shall I say. So that'd be pretty cool. And also, I'm very curious as to what the Axiom 4 crew would come up with a name for it. It's a crew of 4 different nationalities, so maybe there's something kind of unique in there, maybe? I'm not sure.
That would be interesting. Maybe something along the lines of Unity or something along that. And they all have really cool names. I mean, we have Endeavor, which is the first one. Resilience, which they've been using. They did have a NASA mission first, but then they've been using it for the Polaris Dawn missions and some of the Axiom missions, I believe. And that one actually is also going to be launching next month. I'm sorry, it didn't have any Axiom missions, but next month it's also going to be launching the Fram 2 mission, which is going to be the first crewed polar orbit mission, and they're going to be doing some interesting studies looking at the North and South Pole. So that's really, really interesting. But with the Resilience one, it doesn't have a docking port. It either has that dome feature like was on the Inspiration 4 mission, or have like an airlock like on Polaris Dawn. I'm sure they could swap it out and put a docking port on that, but it seems to me like, at least for now, that one's going to be used for these kind of one-off missions that aren't rendezvousing and docking with the space station. Then we have Endurance, and then we have Freedom. So, do we want to have more kind of official sounding names like that? Do we want to name it after one of the space shuttles, or do we want to start giving them goofy names?
Discovery.
Discovery? Okay, that's what you would call it if you were the commander? What would you call it?
100%. 100%.
Discovery? All right. What would you call it, Jared?
Oh, man, I have no idea. So, well, I want to say Endurance is so far my favorite named one, because it's named after the ship that was used in the Trans-Imperial Antarctic Expedition by Ernest Shackleton, which is the one where they were going to cross Antarctica by foot, but they ended up getting stuck in the ice, and then they survived for 3 years on the ice, and then made their way from Antarctica over thousands of miles, 3 of them in a little dinghy boat over thousands of miles to get saved, and then return and have everybody without a person dying during that expedition. That is like perfectly named. Like, if there was ever like, what is spaceflight all about? It is about what happened on that mission, that ability to endure, and that ability to have everybody work together and make that happen. So that is why Endurance is my absolutely favorite one, because 1, it's what spaceflight's all about, and 2, it's an amazing ship, and one that we just recently found too, as well, which was an extremely cool thing from a couple years ago. Oh my gosh, what would I name a spaceship? I can't believe you've handed me this evil responsibility.
Right?
Mike, I think you have to come back to me on that one, because I don't know. I mean,
I would definitely give it a Star Trek name. I would either call it Voyager or Defiant. Enterprise is already going to be used for the Starship human landing system for the moon lander. Otherwise, I'd call it Enterprise. But I'm liking some of the names that the chat is putting out here. Audacity, that would be a good one. Lollipop, Prometheus, that's a good one. I kind of like that. Tiamat, ooh, I really like that one. But then you'd have to explain what that even means every time, which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
All the
But
D&D people gotcha.
But yeah, this is what I'm worried about: is silly names. Gumdrops McGumface. No, let's not give it one of the spacey McSpaceface names.
Ooh, you know what I would like? Let's give lunar module some recognition, and let's name it after Apollo 13's lunar module, Aquarius. So, because Aquarius,
that wouldn't be too
or
bad
we
of
could
a
give
name.
Odyssey a shot again and hope it doesn't go wrong. Odyssey was the Apollo 13 command service module, so maybe we could give that a try.
And if this truly is the last of the Crew Dragon capsules, maybe call it Omega or something like that. I don't know. But yeah, I like that, Jared. Aquarius isn't a bad name. That I would be okay with that.
Yeah. Or Snoopy.
You should just be
Nick,
glad I
it's the
didn't come up with
Snoopy. I'm all about
Aries.
that.
Aries?
Well, I'm saying you should be glad that I didn't come up with Aries. Discovery is a far better name. Naming it after the flagship of the shuttle fleet, the best shuttle. I think it's a really deserving name for the last Crew Dragon capsule.
We could say we can auction off the naming rights to it, perhaps. So earn some more money.
I think that if it is really going to be the Axiom 4 mission, then we need to be spamming Peggy Whitson and getting her to, or have her run a poll or something like that. But it'd be hilarious if she calls it after herself and calls it Space Ninja. That would be awesome.
Peggy's Ride. Peggy's Sweet Ride. And honestly, I feel like Peggy is allowed to do that because she is awesome. So,
well, even kind of looping back to our first segment, we're going to need these Crew Dragons for quite some time. Not just for continuing missions to the International Space Station till at least 2030, but beyond that, for whatever comes next for the LEO Destinations program, whatever the next low Earth orbit crew capsule will be. And there's no official plans, but I'm still holding out hopes in my heart that we'll have a lunar version of Dragon at some point. But probably won't be needed because of Starship, but I would still love to see it. Anyway, I think that with that, we are going to go ahead and head on over to the member show. But before we go, wanted to have a huge thank you to everyone who has been contributing to the show, and especially people who just got your free memberships from Dave Avery. But folks who recently signed up, we have Matto Titan and Kevin, and then Michael Reed, who have recently signed up for our ground support. Thank you very much to all of you. You can sign up for as little as the price of a cup of coffee. Well, cheap cup of coffee. Coffee's expensive now. But in any case, huge thank you to everyone who is supporting the show. We would not be able to do it without you guys. And because of your contributions, we've been able to get just about everybody their own Starlink system now, so that we don't have as much of a loss of our uplinks while we're doing this. So again, big thank you to everyone who has been contributing to the show. And for those of you who were just gifted a membership, you will be able to join us very soon in the member show. We will continue chatting and speculating and talking about all things space. So
now, before we go, Master of Ceremonies, Master of the Games, I don't know what to call him yet. We got to get him a good title because we started this last week. So what is the total, what is the to-date yearly tally count for the hosts in the chat room and their game? Do you have the total tally?
Yeah, so if I remember correctly, last week, both Jared and Mike, you both got one right, and you both got one right this week. So I believe that puts you on 2 each. Chat room, I'm going to say they got one right this week, got one right last week. Let's say they're on 2, and I'm going to say Jamie, you're on 0.
Sounds about right. All right, thank you all so much for watching, and for those of you who just became members, join us over in the member show. Thank you so much, and we'll see you next week.
bye.